Hello and welcome to the Mariana Dalto Show, the podcast where small business owners share their stories, insights, and strategies for success. Today, I have an amazing guest. Her name is Laura Lynch. She's the founder of the Tiny House Advisor and the host of the House More Moolah podcast. Laura's journey into tiny house living began with a personal quest for financial freedom, and today she's helping others achieve the same through downsizing and embracing a life that is rich in experience rather than square footage. So we will dive into her story, the financial freedom that she's gained along the way, and how you can start living big with your tiny house while achieving financial freedom. Welcome, Laura, to the show.
Mariana, thank you so much for having me.
Yes, I'm so excited to talk about this. So let's start first learning a little bit about your journey, how you started, how your life changed within this new topic, and then how you launched your business around this experience.
Yeah, such a great and integrated topic because without my business, I would not be in the position that I'm in. And without my house, I would not be in my business. It's all so authentically connected. So I was a financial advisor in a corporate world, making mid six figures. I lived in a 2,300 square foot American dream house, climbing the corporate ladder, doing all the things that you're supposed to do. And then, as with so many people, the pandemic really changed my perspective on things. I remember driving south on I-95, having visited my family over my stepson's spring break. And all of a sudden, we started hearing news that they were going to close the borders into states. And it was kind of a surreal experience, that first wave of news of the pandemic. And at that moment, while driving down the interstate, I'm saying to my husband, why are we going to a place where it is so expensive for us to live? And as a financial advisor, our income is often tied to what's going on in the markets, and the stock market was crashing. And I felt very fragile at that moment. And I'm like, why are we not going to our tiny house where we don't owe anybody anything and where all we have to do is just make sure that we have food to eat and, we're in a very quiet place there. And so it really suddenly caused us to ask that question. Why are we living this life? Why are we living this life where we have so many financial obligations and where we have tied ourselves up so much that we feel fragile in times of uncertainty? And so that's when we started on an exploration journey of how do we make our lives more resilient. And so we crafted a 30-month project plan to move into our tiny house. That involved me having to start a new business because I couldn't stay in my corporate role. It didn't allow me to move. And so I had to launch the Tiny House Advisor, which allows me to help other people do financial planning to live in a tiny home or, sort of downsize their lives. And so that business allowed us to move here, and that moving here allowed me to start my business because we have less that we have to pay every month.
That's amazing. And then, so now that you have this business and you're helping people move into tiny houses, what is the main driver for people to come to you? I know that they might be interested in the tiny homes, but what is the main driver people coming to you? What is the main problem that you solve? And I know you are a financial advisor, so maybe the problem starts like, I don't have money. What's the best way to approach this? And one of the solutions is the tiny houses, or what is the main problem that you solve for customers that the ones that you work so far?
Yeah, so there's two things that are major hurdles that people have to overcome in order to move into a tiny house specifically. And one is about the money part, because there is not a mortgage for a tiny house. So you can't just say, hey, I'm going to move from my regular house and sell my house and get a mortgage and buy a tiny house and downsize. There is no mortgage for tiny house. There are some lending solutions out there that have very specific caveats and rules around them. but figuring out the money part of moving from a rental or parents' house or my house or whatever into a tiny house is more complicated than going and finding someone to help you, a realtor to help you find a house, and getting a mortgage lender and getting a first-time home buyer loan or any other conventional or other mortgage. So I help people navigate the money part of making that transition. The second major hurdle is people have to figure out is parking or placement, whatever you want to call it. Tiny homes are not legal in the ways that regular single family homes are. You can't always buy a piece of land and just put a tiny home on it. It depends on the rules in your jurisdiction, whoever has the authority there, whether that's city, county, or state. So I volunteer with the Tiny Home Industry Association. I work on the resource map, which is a map on the website where you click into the state where you perhaps want to put a tiny house, and you can drill down into the city or state or county, whatever, whoever controls the building codes and the zoning, two different things. So helping people navigate the where is the other big part. So money part and where. And so I try to bring both parts of those things together when I work with clients, and we do it in a project way. So we say, hey, it's going to take 5 months, it's going to take 12 months, however long it takes to make the transition. And I work with them for that project period of time. And I overlaid the logistics flow chart, like a project plan, with the money part. So we bring both of those pieces together to help people figure out the whole picture of how to make that transition.
And where do you help people? Is in the US, or the whole US? Is there specific locations? How do people know if they qualify to work with you?
Yeah, so I work with people throughout the country. I work on Zoom. So helping
In the
people.
US.
Yes, in the US only. I certainly don't know all the international rules yet. And doing financial planning outside of the US is something I have not dove into yet.
Okay. So when people are kind of intrigued and interested about, is this for me?
Mhm.
How can you help them assess if this tiny house lifestyle will be right for them from a lifestyle standpoint, from a financial perspective? Do you have tools or things that you can help them understand before you start the project, like to see if this is the right thing for them?
Yeah. The number one thing that I talk about with all clients, no matter their lifestyle, is their values. So we will do a values worksheet and really drill down what are the top 3 things that are most important to you. And these are kind of high level conceptual things. But then if you're intrigued by the tiny house lifestyle, there's a lot of different versions. It's not just a tiny house that's, necessarily placed on land. There are people living in vans for van life. There are people living in buses as schoolies, people with tiny houses they're towing, tiny houses on land, people living in yurts, earthships, shed conversions. Like there's a whole wide variety. And so narrowing that down to what fits, what I'm trying to achieve, what is the lifestyle that I need to have, how much space do I need to have? All of those things are something that I help people navigate, because it's very easy to get caught up in one idea or another. But if you decide to move into a van full time and travel around, but you really would rather be located in one place, then that's going to be, a problem. So we want to figure out what's most important to you first and how that relates to what you're trying to achieve, and put a plan in place for that specific thing.
Okay. And then can you share a story, maybe a client story without saying names or anything like that, but kind of that maybe face some significant challenges in downsizing, and how you help them overcome that? Because I'm sure they might come in and say, oh yes, I'm excited, I'm gonna do this, and then they start facing a lot of things, and I'm like, I don't know if this was a good idea. So how can you help them overcome the struggles that they might face throughout the process, right? I'm sure it's a long process, so there's a lot to go through.
Yeah, I think that there is definitely challenges in downsizing for everyone. I certainly would have referred to myself as a minimalist, and yet going from 2,300 square feet to 300 square feet is challenging because, you hold on to things that have, sentimental family value or whatever. And so figuring out how to get into that smaller space can be challenging. So I think one of the most important things, going back to what I was saying before, is just really understanding thoroughly and deeply who we are as people and what is at our core. Because once we figure out that core version of ourselves that isn't what we think the world wants us to be, but what we truly want to be, then we can establish a touchstone, a why that we can always go back to over and over again when things get challenging, because they are definitely going to get challenging. This is not a paved path. And so we have to go back to that often. And people sometimes will run into issues like, oh, the place that I wanted to move because I wanted to be closer to family, they're not going to allow this. And so they're going to, we're going to have to pivot, and we're going to have to buy, a single family home. And, and that is just a reality. We can't always necessarily, sometimes we have to pivot and make changes, and that's okay, right? No judgment, right? We have to do what is closest to what we're trying to achieve. But yeah, there's a lot about just being there as a thinking partner and helping people look for, well, have you thought about this? And how are you going to react to that? And, helping people, guiding them through the process and helping them look out for those blind spots and knowing a little bit more than they do in order to be able to point out things that they're going to face before they have to face them, I think is probably a really helpful situation. I talk about a case study on my website. A lot of people that go into tiny living are women, and they are doing it because they want to be closer to family, because they want to have opportunities that they never had through their child rearing years when they were sort of, stuck at home, kind of raising children and doing, what is they felt responsible to do. And they reach a point in life where they have more freedom, and maybe they're a little burnt out with their job, and they really want to do something that's more meaningful. And so I talk about Liz on my website and how she faced the challenge of, she didn't want to make so many different changes to her life at the same exact time because she had just gotten divorced. And she was afraid of how people were going to look at her if she then sold her house and moved into a tiny house, had just gotten divorced, changed her career, how that might look to her friends and family. And so I had to be there as her cheerleader, as, helping her feel confident in making that change, and, sort of how she communicated that to her friends and family so that she could, make all of those changes that she wanted to make in her life without feeling judged as she was doing it.
I'm sure there's a lot of reactions from friends and family when you come with the news, I'm switching to a tiny home and I might be moving, and I'm sure there's a lot of feelings and emotions around that topic, right?
Yes, people are change resistant, right? And they feel uncomfortable. So how do you pre-communicate some things and provide some why, and, help family and, maybe, kids understand while you're making these changes? So yeah, definitely a lot of kind of rolling out that change in a way that feels more comfortable for those around you.
What about those families that have kids? Have you had families that they move to a tiny house with kids? What can you provide? What can you share?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had a great gal, Amanda Acuna, on my website or on my podcast, and she had 2 kids, little kids, in the tiny house with her. And, I think that one thing is to understand that, in my opinion, a single family home where every kid has their own bedroom where they can shut the door and zone out in front of their own screen may not be really that healthy. Maybe we're coming to realize that families being closer together and more interactive might be more healthy for kids. And so I think there's something to be said about, having family together more and less isolation. We all feel some degree sometimes of loneliness. We can feel that, especially in our own home where we can get really spread out. So I think there's something healthy about bringing family together closer. Also, people in tiny livings tend to spend more time outside. And so you really want your kids to spend more time out of doors, and you can get your tiny house in a place where you feel safe and comfortable doing so. I think that's a great idea. But on the other hand, if you are trying to live in less than 400 square feet with a family of 4, that might become intensely challenging. I live in 300 square feet with me and my husband and my 3 big dogs, which
Ah,
right can get, I'm like stepping over dogs all the way through the kitchen. But what we did was, I have a stepson and he now has his own 400 square foot building, right? So he was in here in this loft that I'm sitting in for a while when we were here off and on, and now that we're here permanently, he got his own space built. And so with a lot of the movement or the evolution of the tiny home industry, you can now get small living units individually. So if you are able to, like, if you do get some land and you're able to put a tiny house on it and you can put another ADU on there, then you could put your, teenage or older kids in that space and allow them to have their own space. And you can be connected with a breezeway, or, everybody gathers outside or what have you. So, definitely there are challenges and opportunities there that have to be considered. It's, you know,
and what about the weather? Because you mentioned like, well, when you have a tiny house, you spend a lot of time outside. So do people tend to live in areas where the weather is pretty good around the year? And if not, because they're like, I love, living where it snows, is that feasible still?
yeah. Yeah, so I live where it snows,
Okay.
but it's also in a place where the sun, melts off the snow by 10 a.m. So our snow doesn't stick around. If you're living in the Northeast, for example, and you're dealing with a lot of winter, things that you might consider are, getting some additional greenhouse space or sunroom space or what have you, and thinking about that in terms of your tiny house. Tiny homes are often built with a lot of glass, a lot of windows to make them feel bigger. And so the positioning of the house, the aspect, the way that it is tilted towards the winter sun is probably really important, to have those windows facing the south to capture the winter sun and make you feel sort of warm and cozy in there. But yeah, outside is about, Amanda Acuna, again, who was on my podcast, she said that there's no bad weather, it's just bad clothing. And so I guess I understand where she's coming from, layer up and go for a walk. But yeah, you'll have to spend more time inside in the winter.
Yeah. And then for so I know that you have a free resource that you want to share, but I wanted to ask this question to see if it's related. So
Mhm.
if someone is considering to move to a tiny house, what's the first step that they should take? And is this free resource one of the steps to help kind of start evaluating things in the beginning? Or if not, you tell me and we can go from there.
Yeah. So the two things that are the biggest hurdles, right? Money part and where. So the
Mm.
first thing they need to do is start thinking about, if tiny house is the solution, right? Not van life, not schooling, not RV, not shed. Like, if a tiny house is the solution, where are you going to put it, right? And that's a good idea is to go to the Tiny Home Industry Association, start researching, what different rules are in places that you're considering. Once you know where and you know that it's going to be legal, then you got to figure out your money part, right? And so the free resource that I'm offering is a free financial freedom calculator. And this is where you can go in, you can create this secure login, you'll put in your basic demographic information, and then you can aggregate all of your financial accounts. You click on them and you log into your different accounts, and everything comes together so you can see your income, you can see your expenses, so you see the difference if there's room for savings there, and you also get a calculation of your net worth. And so it's a really good dashboard, financial dashboard, so that you can just see where you are from a financial standpoint. And then once you have that free tool, you have an option to get a one-time consult with me. We can just look at a few key things that you can do in order to make that movement forward. But definitely the where and then the money. It's the most important things.
And then also they can, if they want to keep doing research and thinking through this, they can go to the podcast, right? So tell us a
Mhm.
little bit, what are the themes about the podcast? What are the different things that they can expect from listening to the different shows?
Yeah, so I am the host of Less House More Moolah. Moolah is a slang word that means money. So the idea there is that we can achieve more financially if we focus less on buying the most house we can afford. And so lots of different people come on my podcast, mostly in interview style. So I talk to different people living in the lifestyle in all the different formats, in vans, in buses, and tiny houses. I also bring on industry experts to talk about important concepts like insuring your tiny home was an episode that I did. Also health insurance for nomadic people. So if you're traveling around in van life, you have to figure out how do you get health insurance that's going to keep you covered throughout the country. So that's another important topic that I talk about. So that's what the podcast is. There's some other great podcasts. Ethan Waldman has a great Tiny Lifestyle podcast where he interviews like so many people in the lifestyle. So lots of good podcasts. HGTV is a great place for Tiny House Expedition, has great tours of homes. And so those are great ideas. Going to a festival or an expo will allow you to walk through a home and understand whether or not that space is going to work.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is very important to see it in person and to experience it in person.
That's great. Anything else that you want to share before we finish this episode? I want for the audience to get as much information as they can from the podcast, your website, anything else that you want to share before we close out?
Yes. So one of the things that I always talk about whenever I go to festivals is the long-term financial outcome. So I'm a certified financial planner professional. So my job is always to help people figure out what is this decision going to do for you in the long term. And the reality is the average home sale price for a regular home in the US was $430,000 last year. Right now we're at mortgage rates of about 6.2%. So that is $414,000 in interest that a person would pay over 30 years on the single family home. And if you contrast that with the purchase price of a tiny home, say $150,000, you pay it off in 4 years with a similar payment type, you pay $27,000 in interest. So that means that you have a huge financial impact that you can make by not buying as much house as you can afford, and figuring out what you do with that extra money is about your values and what is most important to you. Do you want to spend more time with your family? Do you want to start a business? Do you want to solve cancer? Like what lights you up, and what can you achieve by not doing what the world tells you that you're supposed to do, which is buy a huge house?
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Laura, it's been great, like learning all this world about tiny homes. Is so interesting, and I hope the audience get a good feel of what it looks like and the process. And of course, they can learn more from Laura's podcast, website, and resources. Laura, tell us about your website, or where people can reach out to you.
Yes. So I'm at thetiniHouseAdvisor.com. Advisor is spelled ADVISER, like giving advice, advisor. My website, Less House More Moolah, is found on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. And that free resource is at altamericandream.com.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Laura, again for joining us today, for providing all those insights. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in. Again, we will add all these links and resources to the show notes for people to grab them if they are interested to keep exploring the tiny home adventure. And for the listeners, if you like this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and leave a review, and we'd love to see you again. Thank you, Laura, for all your insights.
Thanks, Mariana.
Bye. Thank you. See you next time.